I'm Sarah Jackson, host of Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, a listening experience choreographed to help you elevate your internal communications to the pro level.
The gamification principles and game dynamics translate beautifully. It doesn't matter what the technology is, even us just having a conversation today where we can't really see one another, the spirit of play is present and it leads to direct engagement and buy-in. We call it mystery, incentive, laughter, and empowerment. We find that these four universal principles always motivate people in a positive way. Start with anything that fosters human connection. Don't overcomplicate it.
That's Blair Bloomston from a company called Game On Nation. Today, we are going to learn how to go the extra mile to pull our employees in close to our communications. Literally. Blair is going to walk us through the MILE method. MILE in this episode stands for mystery, incentive, laughter, and empowerment. 4 secret elements that will help us, as Blair teaches, double down on the fun while creating meaningful moments for our employees.
I'm Blair Bloomston. I'm partner and vice president of business development at Game On Nation, and I am coming to you from Bradenton, Florida today.
Well, Blair, I met you at, I know the ALI conference. You were, I think, the moderator, and I was so excited to see you and to see you in action doing some of the magical things that your company offers. And today we are going to be talking and uncovering all the greatest tips and strategies and plans for using gamification to pull people into your comms rather than push. Now, this was something that was one of our top 5 requested episodes. People really want to know, how do I pull people instead of push people? And so before we dive into this whole episode today, can you just give us a high level kind of your backstory? How did you get into this wonderful world of internal communications?
Oh, awesome, Sarah. Yeah, I'm happy to share. I have been on the tugboat side of this industry for 17 years. And when I say tugboat, what I mean is our firm helps big organizations in key challenges related to marketing, leadership, and internal comms. So, all those years ago, we actually began as media coaches for pro athletes. We spent 10 years based at this amazing sports boarding school. It's where the Williams sisters trained when they were young, and Maria Sharapova. And over Game On's years there, we were called in to work on very specific communication techniques for guys in transition into pro sports, like Russell Wilson and Alex Smith have both gone through our program. So what we quickly realized is that when you're working with athletes, you have to create buy-in. You can't just, and I think this relates to internal messaging very directly, you can't just come with the state old of, hey, everybody, click here to open. We need to find ways to make it creative and make it engaging. And the same goes for media training. We couldn't tell these amazingly talented young men like, hey, just speak up, right? Do an interview well. I'm even saying it in an awkward way. Statements don't work. So we crafted a technique using game-based curriculum, using improvisation. And we quickly realized that it moves from athletes into sports executives. And from there, we attracted some audiences in the military. And from there, we've been, at high-level corporate with Deloitte and Hilton. And we even got to do some work on Capitol Hill, which has been really excellent.
That's awesome. I can't wait to get into some more stories from working with those different companies and people. And no matter what episode that I'm doing, I always start with, tell me about your story from last year, because one of the things that our listeners love to hear and compare is the story from that moment in our history. And everyone's story is so unique. So tell us about your journey with 2020 and COVID-19, and what was that like for you, and in context of your company? Are you all remote? Give us a little window, a peek inside of what that was like for you and your team.
So when the pandemic hit, we quickly adapted. And, I'm not going to say it was easy. I think all of us were shook by the sudden change, but Game On was ready to translate our services virtually. And so it was, a very quick move from, 95% live, 5% online to 100% online engagement. But what we did prove out in that process, and it was a cool kind of live science experiment, is that the gamification principles and game dynamics translate beautifully. It doesn't matter what the technology is, even us just having a conversation today where we can't really see one another, the spirit of play is present and it leads to direct engagement and buy in.
So let's get into it. Get us started. When there's so many different words, I think, when people are thinking about gamification. So for this episode and for today's purposes, what are we talking about when we talk about this world of gamification, and why is there such a big opportunity here?
Oh, well, look, I've been doing this since before Word documents used to always mark it as spell check whenever I would type in the word gamification. They couldn't seem to accept that it was a principle and that it was real. Why I think internal comms pros can pay attention to it is because it's just so effective. And I'm willing to bet that they're already embedding some of these principles without really being aware. Best example is if you or any of the listeners have ever had like a coffee rewards punch card. Game dynamics are at play in that moment. In Game On, we define them four ways. We call it mystery, incentive, laughter, and empowerment. We find that these four universal principles always motivate people in a positive way. It's very hard to kind of mess up, I guess I would say. So they're universally safe and true. But go back to those coffee punch cards. There's a reward game dynamic. There's a kind of self competition game dynamic where you're like, how many of this can I get on a streak? Right? At the end of the day, those coffee companies are just winning. You feel like you're winning because of the game of it, but the coffee companies are winning. And so our mission is to kind of share and spread the principles so people can apply them for good. So they can apply them to things like their work and, bringing their teams together.
I love a checklist, and so do our listeners. So I love when you can frame it around those four principles. So mystery, incentive, laughter, and empowerment.
Yeah, yeah, you got it right.
How can I and or we, our listeners, embed those principles, and how do I begin to fit this into my 2021 content strategy? I know another question that our listeners wanted us to tackle is, how do I keep connection in this remote culture with all these different dispersed remote workforce? Is this something that they can kind of a new tool in their back pocket that they can begin using to get a little bit more creative? I know some of them are saying what worked, in 2020, people are tired and they want some new ideas. So how can I start fitting gamification into my content strategy for 2021?
Oh, it's perfect, Sarah. I'm really glad you asked because listen, when we play games, when you go back to like those family gatherings and Monopoly was opened up, the rules of the game, the strategy, it's written down. So you know what to do and if you follow that roadmap, you're going to have hopefully a successful outcome. I don't know. I had an uncle who was a very passionate Monopoly player and a table may have gotten flipped at one point. But, the rules of the game to apply Mile. And let's just take an email campaign as an example. It is so tough to think creatively on the one hand, and then also think within brand voice on the other hand, right? It's like, I have to have free flowing imagination and ideation, but I need to keep it in these boundaries. So, a way that you can apply this Mile strategy is actually just take old email copy that you have and look to reinvent it by applying one or all four of these game dynamics. So let's take mystery as a really clear example. Can you turn a series of emails into like a little piece of information is revealed each time and kind of drop it in using clues as a framework? Actually, create a trope, create a meme for it. Like, these are your clues. These are your next steps. We've had a lot of success by labeling things as quests, as journeys, getting people to adopt the mindset of I'm a detective. So all of these kind of mystery. And listen, you don't have to come up with the best or most creative or innovative idea. They're all out there. You think about Joseph Campbell and mythology. These are all kind of archetypes. But how can you embed mystery? Now, the key is that you have to make it positive. So negative mystery is like when you get a note saying report to the principal's office and you're not quite sure what's going on, right? You don't want to put people in that situation. But if I got a note that said, "Hey, the principal would like to see you for a piece of good news," well then I'm going to be surprised pleasantly. So I know. So that's it's really just an ideation technique at a base level. And then, of course, you can increase it through activations, through behaviors that you want people to adopt, like that spirit of curiosity. So that's M. Yeah. And if I was going to fast forward through I, L, and E, incentive can literally be those rewards. Like the person who has the most comments on social, is going to win a prize this month, right? But we love intrinsic incentives when people are deciding, like, you know what, I'm here, I'm part of this team, I'm going to commit to play well with others. So that's what we like to think about from an ideation perspective. Laughter can just be any form of joy. Could be color, could be imagery, could be music, could be video, right? It doesn't actually have to be like ha ha funny. And we have a rule that is laugh with, not at. So we are kind of down on sarcasm because it can be misinterpreted. We're down on anything that, is against somebody else. But joyful laughing with is very motivational. And then empowerment is that last part of it that is really letting people feel like a leader from where they are in the company, and spotlighting stories. If you've been doing videos from your CEO, throughout email chains, like what about the kind of lowest person on the totem pole? What about the intern who's hopeful in your organization? So that empowerment just goes back to self. And we all choose to be at work together. So how can we celebrate that choice? I'm just fascinated by these principles of gamification because I know that they work. And we should all be aware of how they are working for us and maybe against us, social dilemma level in social media. What keeps us coming back for more? Okay, so if I was encouraging people to not get tripped up, these would be my two best pieces of advice. First, start with anything that fosters human connection, people connection. Really just keep it like, if you can, unless you are selling truly widgets, there are still people that make that happen, right? So get to human stories. And then the second note of it is don't overcomplicate it. I really think of gamification like, let's picture an email. You've got this email and it's the equivalent of a glass of water. It's healthful, it's nourishing, it's simple, it's just what needs to be shared. When you gamify something, I'm adding that purple flavor to it, but I only need like 1 or 2 drops. If I add too much, it blows the whole thing up and it's just a gross purple drink. So keep it human focused and fight for simple. Just that one little drop is enough to amplify.
So if I start off doing something and it feels then different because I'm trying to, let's say, jazz up these virtual events that everybody's, worn out and tired. What if I mean, there's been some times where I've thought of maybe a creative idea and it just falls flat and no one responds. Like, do you have tips on what if this just, kind of falls flat? Was there anything that you've seen companies do to quickly pivot to um, better prepare maybe with, hey, maybe setting expectations, anything that, um, any tips on addressing like that?
I do have tips, but it comes from a very unique kind of go style, which is like when I was in 8th grade, I got nearly all of the Girl Scout badges. So I'm way into like checklists and achieving and getting it done. So my first thing is if you are going to try something new in a virtual setting, please have your group of 10 friends that you can pilot it with. Like in the evenings, actually, maybe with a adult beverage in hand, because then you'll have your loosest, most like what could go crazy moment to test stuff out while it's still safe. While it's still safe. And then the second thing is coming from the world of live, there were times where literally we would have a very well-meaning and like, sincere professional who would be doing an activity with hula hoops with a group of corporate professionals. And so just because we're saying games and gamification does not mean it's silly, does not mean it's childish, does not mean it's embarrassing. That's I think about the trust fall gone wrong. It's it's a stereotype because it has happened. So try to think about things that are just cool, that feel maybe more like networking, that feel more like quizzes or trivia. That stuff is mostly pretty safe and doesn't run the risk of being too Yeah, too silly.
Well, and let's talk about those conferences because when you do moderate, you keep everybody connected. So, is that something that is just coming natural to you, or is that something where when you're thinking through things, it's all intentional, it is strategic, it is planned out? Because it comes off very natural, but knowing and doing events, I know there has to be some sort of step by step thought process to begin to implement this. Can you walk us maybe through your overall strategy?
Oh, sure, sure. Well, to me, it reminds me of doing the work with athletes, you know? So, my background is in performance, as is my business partner, Steve Shenbaum, who's the founder of the company. And Game On's techniques that we train others on and use in our consulting practices is founded in improvisation. So, you know what's cool, Sarah, is I really appreciate, and I'll take, thank you, the compliment that I seem fully prepared, because in reality, my preparation is knowing that it's going to be okay, and knowing that I'm going to follow these three rules. I'm going to create laughter that is positive and uplifting. We're going to laugh with each other, not at each other. That's my number one job as the host, to set the tone. The second rule is that I'm going to have everybody's back, which means I'm going to get to the point and be purposeful and try to take care of them. And the third rule is that I'm going to try to get everybody to create a spirit of celebration and celebrate wins, celebrate key points, highlight it, shout it out. I know that I can show up as an MC and, of course, have my notes, you know, have everybody's bio, have requested the pronunciation of their name beforehand if I'm unsure, because that's respectful. But with that preparation and the three rules of the game, I can show up and have a lot of fun. And I think that's what people take away more than anything.
The Internal Comms Pro Collective is proudly sponsored by Circle. Circle Broadcast takes the guesswork out of your communications by automatically personalizing your staff newsletter, app, and intranet using content you're already creating. Circle's Content Manager feature simplifies the collaboration process by automatically pulling in stories from across your organization. Stop wasting time chasing down stories and start using it to engage your employees. Find out how at circle.com/ICP. That's CERKL.com/ICP. Now, in this next part, Blair shows us how to guide your executives at your company from her experience training big celebrities. She gives us an exercise to create instant connection and confidence, and she'll show us where to start when trying to pull employees into your communications. Now, let's jump back in. Well, and I think it's such a good example and so many I know of our listeners do facilitate these meetings. And again, having been to several different conferences, the ones that you moderate do have a certain tone. And so I think it does all come to people want the framework. They want someone to tell them what to expect. And so I think to set those three rules and to say, okay, this is how today is going to be, it seems like such a simple step, but boy, when you miss it, it does, I think, leave the audience feeling like trying to wrap their head around what is it that I'm listening to now, and now you leave it up to your audience to try to organize it within their mind.
Oh, yeah. People want to know what to expect. I'm hosting a class tomorrow. It's Game On's new. This is our external comms, but we're offering a class to share people insight into how we kind of create this engagement, apply it. But my email today leading up to it was, here's what you can expect. And I know it's what I would want to hear. So yeah, when you talk about facilitating as a comms pro, or maybe this is even more challenging, guiding your executive who has to facilitate something for you, guiding your executive who needs to record video for you, giving them prep to know what to expect. It's that rule of having their back.
So, any tips you can give us on that point? I know you said you mentioned you would train these big, stars. Any quick tips of how you did that we could quickly implement when we're training our execs?
Yes, I love this. I love sharing this exercise because it's super duper tangible. This exercise gets the person that you are supporting into a great, confident place to practice for their presentation or interview. And playing this exercise also creates instant connection because you figure out what you have in common. So the game is called Coins. Coins are simply things that you love: hobbies, interests, achievements, goals, vision, experiences. They can have to do with work because work can create those for us. And a lot of times we end up talking about stuff outside of work. So what we would do often with our athletes, I'll take like a guy who is about to go into the NFL. Many times going through college, being like a highly sought after athlete, their conversations were just about sports. And they weren't ever really asked, what do you do off the field? They were some, but so when I would say to them, well, tell me about your family. How many brothers and sisters do you have? And then you'd find out that they like came from a big family, 7 or 8 kids. And then I could share that my dad was one of 9 kids and growing up with all those uncles and 23 cousins. And then they're talking about their cousins. And like, now we're building real connection. Plus they're smiling, they're engaged, they're speaking from the heart. They really can't speak in a wrong way when you're talking about something that lights them up. So this is how you could apply it. First, it's take a minute to refresh and remember your own coins. Who are the people in your life that light you up? And you'll know it's a coin, by the way, even just now as I'm saying it, if you think of a person and you feel your face start to smile. If you think of a person and you feel your face not start to smile, that's okay. They're still a great person. They might not be a coin for you. Okay. But you have to kind of allow the dopamine to come in. So people are great. Our pets are excellent starting points. Food that we love, travel and places that we care about in the world, and bonuses, everything else. What lights you up that's appropriate, that's joyful. So you play the game of coins by being back in touch with your own and experiencing what it's like to go from thought to feeling and to feel more confident by, thinking about remembering your values and what you value. And then you explain the concept to the other person and you try to extract in that conversation a few coins of theirs, things that they value, their family, what's an amazing food that you cook, random stuff. And then you point out to them. It's amazing how loose and relaxed you are when you talk about the things that you love. Now let's practice this interview and see if we can find the coins of the interview and see if we can, kind of practice out an answer that lets you speak from the heart with that same level of lift.
I love find the coins of the interview. What That's such a treasuring thought, by the way. I love that. Anything else of how we can create these connections? Any other ideas of how do we pull people to our communication instead of push? Any other step by step kind of process that you would suggest that we do? If I'm like, okay, I'm looking at my strategy high level for 2021. Where do I start?
You start with yourself. You start with actually doing what you need to do as a messenger and the crafter of the messages to make sure that you feel grounded, that you have taken an appropriate day off if you need that, and so that you are refreshed and revitalized. And we know this. It's tough to be creative under stress. So my first in 2021, I have to say it hasn't always been this way, but in 2021, the first step has to be kind of protecting yourself a little bit and healing and refinding your inspiration. Then from there, my second step is find a couple allies. If you don't have good allies in the organization, this is a great time to add 1 or 2 who can kind of like be your idea bouncers. And maybe they're external to your immediate team. Maybe these are kind of like your colleague professionals. Hey, I was thinking about this. Hey, have you heard of this? Because it just helps to have friends at work. So use tasks with allies. Yeah, heal yourself, find friends, and then also, and this I'm saying to myself right now, quite honestly, don't overthink it. Simple is key. Don't overthink it. Just go for it.
That is so good. And I would even sometimes have a couple of my friends, I would say, all right, I'm getting ready to do this in a big meeting. If no one answers, please answer and source some of these things to get everybody going. 'Cause sometimes it only takes 1 or 2 people to sort of lean in and be participating to get the rest of the crowd going. So, all right, one thing that you believe internal communicators are missing when approaching this kind of creative work, what would you warn us about before taking our first step, or maybe something you've seen other organizations miss if they're kind of going down the road of gamification?
Okay, I'm going to tweak this, Sarah, because this is what I really feel when we get together at these conferences for internal comms, and when I think about my stakeholders in the network, I don't think they have missed anything. I think that the world is really now in the pandemic times beginning to respect the role of internal communications the way it needs to be respected. And what my encouragement is just to keep believing in the principles that you're applying. I know that they're applying fun. I know that. I know that they're seeking it wherever possible. And so that would be my advice is in the midst of stress, in the midst of maybe more scrutiny and certainly a lot of uncertainty and just change, right? Kind of thinking from that same spirit of play that got us to play hide and seek for 3 hours in the cold weather when we were little kids. If you can, log into your computer first thing and keep that spirit of fun and play alive, that can help the resiliency right now. So double down on fun.
So when you think about all the companies that you've worked with, what's been a really good example, maybe the best idea or of a company that executed gamification?
Yeah, it's this special project to my heart that I got to do inside Hilton, and it was like summer of 2019, so not too long ago. Definitely a different world, but I was so lucky. After many years of doing small projects with them, we had 6 brands come together, and we created a true quest, a gamified learning experience for Hilton Honors, and we got to ship it out to 6,000 properties globally. So the chance to do something that mixed multiple cultures, languages, and Hilton really sponsored, the fact that we could customize it for each brand voice, but keep one universal truth throughout the whole thing. So it did really well. It grew Hilton Honors quite significantly. They saw double-digit increases in performance over the period and in the weeks after. So that was kind of cool sustainment. But most of all, I've kept in touch with my Hilton friends, and they've said that the honors guests are really the lifeline of their company right now, and that the timing of that, unbeknownst to them, really did, help support the through line that they needed in 2020 and now. And so that kind of had sustainable meaning. That was a really cool project that we did.
I want to get to, our last question here because we do talk about, and as an internal communicators, we've always got the polish on. But on this show, it's a time to kind of, sit out on the back porch and it's just me. And so can you share maybe the worst project or one where you're like, oh my gosh, that was a complete failure? And the only reason why I say that and in those terms is we get the greatest learning from kind of the goof ups. Anything that you can think of that where you gained your biggest learning from?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. You keep those near and dear to your heart too. And it actually is funny because it was about 16 years before that event for Hilton. So, in that time when we were at the sports boarding school, it was so international. There were 80 countries represented. And one summer, the University of Miami came to us and said, hey, look, we have a group of 17 young tennis players, middle school age from South Korea. And they're not really that good at tennis to be able to play at the Nick Bolletary level. Could you just do a game on class for them? And so we built this thing called English in Action. It lasted 8 weeks. And I, my very young self, attempted to, spend 4 hours a day, 5 days a week with students who spoke no English and teach them communication. So, oh, it was great. It was great. We got so creative. We connected where we could, body language. We played a lot of charades. And I know that they had a great experience, and it was major learning for me to realize, eat the apple one bite at a time.
Well, Blair, I cannot thank you enough for, like I said, in those ALI conferences, you model the way of, how this would work, how this would feel. I've seen it, I felt it, and it creates such a connection among us before we kind of get into the content, of the day. So to spell some of these principles out and, provide us such a great organizing framework to kind of jazz up and re-engage and give us kind of another shot in the arm while we head into 2021. I can't thank you enough for giving us a little bit of insight in how to use gamification to pull our audiences closer to us and to feel, that connection closer. If people want to learn more or if they want to engage your company, where can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So our website is gameonnation.com. We're doing now really cool live events that are just open to the public who want to join us. And it's all sorts of goodness for your professional career. Definitely focused on people who, like internal communicators, are the ambassadors, are the messengers, and craft the voice. That's where we're really good at, as you said, Sarah, jazzing it up.
Well, we will put all of those links in our show notes so they can get a hold of you. Blair, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for being on the show today.
Awesome, Sarah. It's so great always to connect with you.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another tactic to put in our toolbox. If you want to get in touch with Blair and learn how to implement gamification into your strategy, we'll be sure to link her information in today's show notes. Stay with us next week as our journey to uplevel your internal communications to the pro level continues.
Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, is produced by the Internal Comms Pro Collective and proudly supported by the Circle Broadcast Suite, an entire suite built for internal communicators. Learn more at circle.com. And don't forget to visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes for our free resource guides. Thank you for listening.